I tested them all. Feet, toes, fingers, eyes, failures. Poor stability, no control, reduced force. But the hand is different.
Hello, and welcome back everybody. Today we are taking a look at a survival horror game developed by Emberflight Games, titled It Reaches, set to release on May 18th, 2026. This is a survival horror game where you play as a police officer responding to a call at an abandoned hospital. Once you get there, you realize things are not what they seem, and you need to escape the horrors lurking inside the facility. As you go through the game, you also discover secrets about experiments that took place there, with the overall goal being to survive and escape. While this isn't exactly groundbreaking survival horror game, it follows a lot of modern horror conventions, but it does do them very well. The atmosphere is solid, and honestly, it's something I'm really looking forward to when it releases later this month. Alright, as we get started with this review, let's make a few callouts first, and honestly, this is kind of a big deal for me, is a sensitivity warning. The game is presented in a body cam format, so there's a lot of swaying camera movement which may cause motion sickness or nausea for some players. I personally experienced this after playing for about 48 minutes of gameplay, and once I stopped playing I still felt a little nauseous for about 15-20 minutes after. That being said, it doesn't ruin the experience, so do keep that in mind. Secondly, like I mentioned in my introduction, this game doesn't really reinvent the wheel. It does the formula well, but it follows a lot of the same mechanics you see in other survival horror games. You're running around trying to escape, solving puzzles, finding keys or fuses, and progressing from one area to the next. So let's start with the positive first, because this game actually does a few things really well. The biggest standout for me is honestly the body cam perspective. That style has been getting more popular lately in horror games, but I think it works really well here because it makes everything feel more immersive and grounded. During chase scenes especially, it creates a lot more tension than your normal first-person camera would. The atmosphere is also done really well. The abandoned hospital setting feels creepy, the lighting works well, and the background sounds like old building noises, flickering lights, ambient audio, all help build tension throughout the game. The sound design overall was honestly probably one of the stronger parts of the experience. I also want to give credit where it's due, because despite some performance issues, the game itself was stable. I didn't experience any crashes or freezes during my playthrough, which is always a good sign, especially for a demo build this close to release. And overall, even though the game doesn't really reinvent survival horror, it understands the formula pretty well and does a decent job creating tension and keep you moving from the environment to environment. Now, moving on to the negatives, this is where some of the issues start to hold the experience back for me. The biggest one was performance. On my system, the game was pretty consistently running below 30 frames per second. And basically, this causes that body cam style gameplay with a lot of movement that it makes it feel like really jerky and stuttery, and at times honestly kind of nauseating. After around 45 minutes of gameplay, I actually still felt a little motion sick even after stopping. I also had some strange graphical hiccups during gameplay. There were moments where the monster's textures or models would briefly look unfinished or almost melted before snapping back to normal. It wasn't game breaking, but it was noticeable enough to pull me out of the atmosphere a few times. Another issue for me was the door mechanics. Some doors open inwards, some open outwards, but they do have a collision on them, so if your character collides with them, they stop opening or they swing back the other direction. During chase sequences, this became frustrating because there were a few moments where I physically couldn't move backwards fast enough to let the door fully open. I'm not entirely sure if it's tied to collision mechanics, frame rate, or just how the interaction system works, but it definitely interrupted the flow of gameplay. And finally, while the atmosphere is strong, the actual gameplay mechanics feel very similar. You're running from point A to point B, solving puzzles, finding fuses, and progressing through locked areas. It works, but it's something we've seen in pretty much every survival horror game at some point. Overall, I think It Reaches is a decent survival horror experience with a really strong atmosphere and cool body cam presentation that helps it stand out visually from other games in the genre. That being said, the performance issues, the repetitive mechanics, and a few frustrating gameplay interactions definitely held it back for me. So overall, I'd probably give the game a 6 out of 10. I don't think it's a bad game by any means, and if you enjoy modern survival horror games, there's probably still something here worth checking out, especially if the developers continue polishing the optimization and gameplay mechanics before release. But as it currently stands, while it has some really solid ideas and atmosphere, it just didn't really separate itself enough from other horror games for me personally. Again, this does release here in the next couple of days on May 18th. So if you're into survival horror, feel free to pick it up and give it a try.